So, like most people, I've been enjoying the Elden Ring DLC for the better part of last 2 weeks. And there's been a discussion going on about whether or not the game is too hard. And honestly, for me, I don't think it is. But the best take I've seen so far on the matter is the Moist Critical video titled Too Hard, where he calls out some people for not engaging with game's mechanics and then complaining that it's too hard. So not using the tools that the game gives you. However, I've also seen people say that for them, the game gets a bit too easy after you collect enough Shadow Tree blessings, and they would like to see the ability to remove them from their character without the need to go and play a new game cycle. And as someone who also likes to challenge themselves, I would also like to see this ability, because I finished the game on the Shadow Tree Blessing level 15, and I felt like for the last boss it was an okay challenge. However, I wanted to try New Game Plus, and I've noticed that my damage is a bit on the higher side when I got to the DLC. So this challenge that I had before was kind of gone, and it would be nice to be able to revert to like Shadow Tree Blessing 10 without the need to start over. And this also reminded me about the conversation I had with my buddy from work when the base game came out. He's a huge Souls fan. He finished the previous titles multiple times, together with Sekiro and Bloodborne. And when he got to Elden Ring, he actually didn't like it because he said it was too much for casuals, and he basically steamrolled the game. When I asked him like what build did he use, he said, well, he ran around with double katanas scaling with intelligence, which is a pretty strong build even now after they've nerfed it a bit. And I know that he knew that those weapons were strong, and together with his experience with previous titles and countless of hours that he put into them, this basically trivialized the base Elden Ring experience for him. So similarly to some people who refuse to engage with game mechanics because they want to beat the game in a specific way, and then they complain that the experience is not fun because they lack the skill to do it, what he did, in my opinion, is he refused to reevaluate his approach to the game and curate his experience so that he can have fun without steamrolling the game. He basically refused to adjust his playstyle to his skill level and wanted the game to be still challenging for him. And it's funny to me that this is something that, at least in my opinion, is a fundamentally the same approach that results in two different outcomes for two different types of people, both with completely opposite approaches to the game. Now let's get one thing straight. The original Dark Souls and Demon Souls were not that hard. FromSoft progressively increased the challenge with each title, and we've always adapted. Now they've created a title accessible to both the casual player, within reason, and can still provide a healthy amount of challenge for someone who beat those games for all those years. Now, given the fact that FromSoft keeps using basically the same formula for their games, they're just improving on it, it seems that the core audience they are targeting did not change. It just expanded with the added accessibility that comes from the increased arsenal of tools that you can use to beat the game. Now combine this with more challenging bosses that have to accommodate the increased arsenal, and you will have a situation where some returning players might refuse to reevaluate how they approach the game, and because of that they will not adjust to the changes that happened outside of the game. So they got better, they got older. You get the idea. This doesn't mean that the enjoyment of the game is the player's responsibility. It's still the job of the developers to deliver a good experience, but I'm a firm believer that players have to meet them halfway, and the current situation with people saying that the game got too hard is basically some players refusing to do that. This doesn't absolve FromSoft from any legitimate criticism, but it's another perspective that I think is worth considering, that in a way we have to allow ourselves to become the target audience, since our approach has a huge impact on the quality of the experience. For example, I tend to gravitate towards sword and board builds, like no magic, just a simple knight with a long sword and a shield. This is how I have fun. But I remember playing Dark Souls 3 and noticing how it's kinda spam friendly, making a long sword a very, I would say, meta weapon. It was apparent that the game was catering towards the knight build. And my other characteristic is that I kinda dislike meta builds, so it kinda sours the experience for me. So I decided to switch it up and went for my second favorite, which is colossal weapons. And I had fun. This kinda gets me thinking that there might come a day when, for whatever reason, I won't be able to enjoy my preferred playstyle anymore. And I'm wondering if I will be able to adjust, to reevaluate my approach to the game, or to games as a whole, and then adjust so that I can have fun. One fine example of this, or rather two, are the playthroughs that I've seen from Moist Critical and Asmongold, who both approached the game completely differently, where Asmongold wanted to create the most busted and brain-dead build that he could, so that he would be able to basically no-skill the game, while Moist Critical decided to choose a weapon and complete the game with it, and he only switched to something similar. And in both cases, those players had fun, because they adjusted their own playstyles to their individual skill level and their expectations of fun. And in a way, if you do not do that, and this applies to basically any game can be miserable. It doesn't matter if it's like the best game in the world, it will be miserable because you made it miserable. This doesn't mean that the developers are free from criticism. On the contrary, I believe that if we have in mind the fact that we are partially responsible for our own enjoyment of the game, we will be able to provide a much more constructive and comprehensive critique, because we will have a much clearer idea of what we want from the game. That will be it. Cheers.